Have you ever wondered about those forgotten African-American recipes that no one makes anymore? These dishes once filled homes with flavor, family stories, and a deep sense of identity every day. What happened to this rich culinary heritage? And can it be brought back before it disappears completely? Chicken foot soup was a staple in many African-American kitchens, cherished for its deep, rich broth that comes from slow-cooking chicken feet for hours. This traditional soup provided a comforting source of nourishment, especially during times when meat was scarce or expensive. The gelatinous texture from the feet gave the broth a velvety mouthfeel and packed it with collagen, which was prized for its health benefits. Families would often add a mix of vegetables such as onions, carrots, and celery to enhance the flavor and nutrition of the soup. This dish was more than just food. It was a way to make the most out of every part of the animal, reflecting the resourcefulness and resilience of the community. The slow cooking process allowed tough ingredients to soften and transform into something tender and satisfying, making it a warming meal on cold days or after hard work. Chicken foot soup was often passed down through generations, carrying stories and memories along with its unique flavor. Today, it is a rare find on modern tables, but its legacy remains as a testament to culinary creativity and cultural heritage. Peanut butter sandwich with pickles might sound unusual today, but this quirky combination was a beloved snack in many African-American households. The creamy, slightly sweet peanut butter contrasted sharply with the sharp tang and crunch of pickles, creating a surprising harmony of flavors. It was a quick, affordable, and filling treat, perfect for kids coming home from school or adults needing a simple bite between meals. This sandwich reflects a tradition of combining unexpected ingredients to stretch limited resources while still delighting the palate. It was also an example of comfort food that didn't require fancy ingredients or long preparation, embodying the essence of home cooking during tough economic times. The salty brine of the pickles balanced the richness of the peanut butter, offering both texture and taste that kept people coming back for more. This combination might seem odd to some, but for those who grew up with it, it evokes a sense of nostalgia and the warmth of family kitchens. Today, the peanut butter sandwich with pickles remains a hidden gem of forgotten flavors. Sweet potato biscuits were a delightful twist on traditional biscuits, made by incorporating mashed sweet potatoes into the dough. This addition gave the biscuits a subtle natural sweetness and a tender, moist crumb that set them apart from regular savory biscuits. Sweet potatoes, abundant and affordable, brought not only flavor but also nutritional value, including fiber and vitamins. These biscuits were a perfect accompaniment to meals, whether served alongside savory dishes or enjoyed with butter and honey for breakfast. The use of sweet potatoes in biscuits highlights the creativity in adapting recipes based on available ingredients and seasonal produce. They were particularly popular in Southern African American communities where sweet potatoes were a dietary staple. The soft texture and warm color of the biscuits made them inviting and comforting, often baked fresh for family gatherings and holidays. These biscuits bridge the gap between sweet and savory, providing a versatile bread option that has unfortunately slipped from regular rotation in modern kitchens. Despite this, sweet potato biscuits remain a charming symbol of culinary tradition and innovation. Field pea salad was a refreshing cold dish that brought together boiled field peas, finely chopped onions, and a tangy vinegar-based dressing to create a perfect summer side. This salad was prized for its balance of textures: the soft yet firm peas, the crisp bite of onions, and the bright acidity of the dressing. Field peas, a staple legume in African American cooking, were inexpensive and highly nutritious, making them a reliable source of protein and fiber. The salad was often prepared ahead of time, allowing the flavors to meld and deepen, making it a popular choice for picnics, potlucks, and family gatherings. The vinegar dressing not only enhanced taste, but also helped preserve the salad, allowing it to be enjoyed over several days. Field pea salad reflected a tradition of using humble ingredients creatively, emphasizing freshness and simplicity. It was an accessible dish that showcased the ability to transform basic pantry staples into something flavorful and satisfying. Today, it is a largely forgotten recipe that deserves rediscovery for its taste and cultural significance. Molasses glazed ham hocks were a centerpiece of many family meals, slow-cooked until tender and coated with a rich, sweet molasses glaze that caramelized beautifully. Ham hocks, a tougher and more affordable cut of pork, were prized for their flavor and ability to infuse dishes with smoky depth. The molasses glaze added a distinct sweetness that balanced the savory richness of the meat and helped transform humble ingredients into a festive dish. Families often serve these glazed hocks with hearty sides like collard greens, black-eyed peas, or cornbread, creating meals that were both filling and flavorful. This dish was popular during times when making the most out of every ingredient was essential, and molasses was a common sweetener available in many households. The slow cooking process allowed the meat to fall off the bone, making it perfect for sharing. Molasses-glazed ham hocks were more than just food. They were a symbol of community, celebration, and culinary resourcefulness that has sadly faded from everyday cooking. Cornmeal Johnny cakes were thin, golden cakes cooked on a griddle, offering a simple and satisfying bread alternative in many African American homes. Made primarily from cornmeal, water, and salt, these cakes were easy and quick to prepare, providing an affordable staple when wheat flour was scarce or expensive. Johnny cakes could be served sweet with syrup or molasses, or savory with butter or salted accompaniments, demonstrating their versatility at the table. These cakes hark back to Native American influences on Southern cooking, showcasing the blending of culinary traditions. They were particularly popular in rural areas and often accompanied hearty stews or greens, soaking up flavorful sauces and gravies. The crisp exterior and soft interior made them a comforting and filling option for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Despite their simplicity, Johnny cakes required skill to cook perfectly, making them a point of pride for home cooks. This humble dish has largely fallen out of favor in modern kitchens but remains a delicious example of enduring traditional fare. Smothered pork chops were a soul food classic, featuring pork chops slowly cooked in a rich, savory gravy loaded with onions, garlic, and spices. The smothering process tenderized the meat while the flavorful sauce soaked into every bite, creating a deeply comforting dish. This recipe was often a Sunday favorite, bringing families together over a hearty meal that stretched affordable ingredients into something special. Pork chops were a common protein choice, accessible and versatile, and the thick gravy was typically made from pan drippings, broth, and a roux, highlighting frugality and flavor maximization. The dish's roots are steeped in African American culinary traditions that emphasize slow cooking techniques to transform simple cuts of meat. Served alongside staples like mashed potatoes, collard greens, or rice, smothered pork chops embodied warmth and nourishment. Though less commonly made today, this recipe remains a symbol of comfort and home cooking that many remember fondly and wish to revive. Buttermilk pie was a beloved Southern dessert with a creamy, custard-like filling that balanced tangy buttermilk with sweet vanilla and eggs in a flaky pie crust. This simple yet elegant pie was a common feature at family gatherings and celebrations, prized for its smooth texture and rich flavor. Buttermilk, a dairy byproduct widely used in traditional cooking, provided a distinctive tang that set this pie apart from other custards. The recipe required few ingredients but rewarded patience and technique to achieve the perfect silky consistency. This pie was often served with a dusting of nutmeg or cinnamon, adding a warm spice note that complemented the tanginess. It was a dessert born of necessity and tradition, reflecting the resourcefulness of cooks who turned basic pantry staples into a cherished treat. Buttermilk pie's popularity has waned over time, overshadowed by more modern desserts, yet it remains an iconic part of African American culinary heritage, deserving rediscovery. Sweet potato and black-eyed pea stew was a hearty, nourishing dish combining two staple ingredients in African American kitchens into a warming, flavorful stew. Sweet potatoes brought natural sweetness and creamy texture, while black-eyed peas added protein and earthiness, making this a balanced and filling meal. Often seasoned with onions, garlic, smoked ham hocks, or spices like cayenne and thyme, the stew delivered layers of depth and comfort. This dish was particularly popular during colder months or times of economic hardship when maximizing nutrition from affordable ingredients was essential. The stew represented the blending of African foodways with Southern American ingredients, a culinary fusion reflecting history and survival. Its slow cooking process allowed flavors to meld while softening the legumes and vegetables into a satisfying whole. Though once a common meal shared around kitchen tables, sweet potato and black-eyed pea stew has slipped from regular menus but holds rich cultural significance as a dish worth reviving. Peach-glazed cornbread was a unique take on classic cornbread, incorporating sweet peach preserves as a glaze to add moistness and a fruity contrast to the savory base. Cornbread, a cornerstone of Southern and African American cuisine, was typically dense and crumbly, but the peach glaze transformed it into a delightful blend of sweet and savory flavors. This dish was especially popular during peach season when fresh or preserved peaches were abundant and affordable. Families would bake the cornbread fresh, then spread a thick layer of peach preserves over the warm top, sometimes finishing it with a light sprinkle of cinnamon or sugar for extra warmth. The result was a comforting side that paired beautifully with hearty dishes like greens, beans, or fried meats. Peach-glazed cornbread showcased the inventive spirit of home cooks who elevated simple ingredients into something special. Though largely forgotten today, it remains a testament to the flavorful ingenuity found in traditional recipes. Grits and greens was a beloved pairing in African American kitchens, where creamy, stone-ground grits were served alongside seasoned, slow-cooked greens, such as collards or mustard greens. The grits, smooth and hearty, provided a comforting base that balanced the bold, often smoky flavors of the greens. These greens were simmered with garlic, onions, and sometimes smoked meat or bacon fat, infusing them with deep, rich taste. This duo was more than just food. It was a symbol of home, resilience, and tradition passed through generations. Grits and greens were commonly eaten for breakfast or dinner, making the most of affordable ingredients that packed nutrition and flavor. The combination also reflects a deep connection to Southern agriculture and African culinary heritage, highlighting the resourcefulness of cooks who used what was available to create satisfying meals. Though simple, this dish required skill and patience to perfect, especially in preparing the greens just right. Today, while still enjoyed in some areas, grits and greens have become less frequent at the dinner table, making their revival a celebration of a rich cultural past. Watermelon pickles were a unique Southern delicacy made by pickling the often discarded rind of watermelons in a sweet and sour brine. This creative use of the entire fruit showcased the ingenuity in traditional African American cooking, where waste was minimized and flavors were maximized. The rind, peeled and sliced, would be soaked in vinegar, sugar, and spices such as cloves and cinnamon, transforming it into a crunchy, tangy treat that complemented many meals. Watermelon pickles were especially popular in summertime when watermelons were abundant, offering a refreshing palate cleanser or side dish. They were often served at family gatherings, barbecues, and church socials, becoming a nostalgic favorite for many. The preservation method also reflected the practical need to make food last longer before refrigeration was common. Though the practice of making watermelon pickles has faded, their flavor remains a delicious reminder of cultural creativity and sustainability in cooking. Rediscovering this dish means reconnecting with history and enjoying a distinct taste that many have never experienced. Smoky collard greens with bacon drippings were a cherished side dish that married the earthy bitterness of collards with the deep, savory richness of rendered bacon fat. Slow cooked over hours, these greens absorbed the smoky flavor and fat from bacon drippings, elevating simple vegetables into something hearty and satisfying. The process usually involved simmering the greens with onions, garlic, and a splash of vinegar, which balanced the richness with a touch of acidity. This dish was a staple at Sunday dinners, family reunions, and holiday feasts, symbolizing comfort, community, and tradition. The use of bacon drippings reflected a time when cooks made every part of the animal count, honoring food without waste. Collard greens themselves are nutrient-dense, providing vitamins and minerals vital in diets during times when access to fresh produce was limited. Despite changes in dietary trends, smoky collard greens with bacon drippings remain a treasured recipe, though less commonly prepared today, offering a flavorful link to culinary heritage that is worth preserving. Boiled peanuts were a popular street snack deeply rooted in Southern African American culture, loved for their soft, salty texture and earthy flavor. Unlike roasted peanuts, boiling peanuts in salted water softened the shells and nut, creating a unique experience that was both comforting and addictive. This snack was often sold from roadside stands and trucks, making it a familiar taste during long journeys or community events. Boiled peanuts were inexpensive and easy to prepare, making them accessible to people of all ages and backgrounds. The tradition of boiling peanuts traces back to African culinary practices, symbolizing the continuation of cultural foodways through generations. They were commonly enjoyed during harvest season when fresh peanuts were plentiful, serving as a natural, nutritious treat. Although not as widespread today, boiled peanuts remain a beloved regional specialty in some areas, evoking memories of simpler times and the joy of sharing food within communities. Rediscovering this snack invites a taste of history and the warm spirit of Southern hospitality. Rice and okra casserole was a comforting baked dish, combining fluffy rice with tender slices of okra and a creamy cheese or cream sauce, creating a rich and satisfying side. Okra, a vegetable with African origins, added a unique texture and flavor that complemented the mild, starchy rice. This casserole was a popular way to stretch ingredients while providing a wholesome, filling addition to meals. The creamy element, often made from cheese or milk, bound the ingredients together, making each bite smooth and flavorful. Families favored this dish during gatherings and holidays, appreciating its ability to feed many with simple ingredients. The casserole also reflected African American culinary ingenuity, blending indigenous ingredients with Southern cooking styles. Though it once appeared regularly on tables, rice and okra casserole has become less common, overshadowed by modern convenience foods. Bringing this dish back celebrates a culinary tradition that honors history, flavor, and community sharing. Blackberry molasses jam was a deeply flavored preserve made by combining fresh blackberries with rich molasses, resulting in a dark, sweet spread that was a pantry staple in many African American households. The jam was prized for its intense, complex taste that balanced the tartness of berries with the deep caramel notes of molasses. Preserving blackberries in this way allowed families to enjoy the fruit's flavor long after the harvest season ended, a practical necessity before refrigeration and modern preservation methods. Blackberry molasses jam was often served on biscuits, cornbread, or toast, enhancing simple breads with bursts of sweetness and warmth. The use of molasses, a byproduct of sugar refining, was common due to its availability and affordability, especially in Southern communities. This jam symbolized resourcefulness and a connection to the land, as blackberries grew wild and molasses was a pantry staple. Though less made today, this jam remains a delicious reminder of traditional foodways and the rich history behind everyday ingredients. Candied sweet potatoes with marshmallows were a festive favorite, especially during holidays, layering tender sweet potatoes with a sugary glaze and melted marshmallows on top. The dish combined the natural sweetness of the potatoes with the soft, gooey texture of marshmallows, creating a dessert-like side that delighted many families. Sweet potatoes were an affordable and nutrient-rich staple, and adding marshmallows elevated the dish, making it special for celebrations such as Thanksgiving or Christmas. This recipe reflected both creativity and joy in cooking, transforming simple ingredients into a comforting and visually appealing dish. The sugary topping was often made from brown sugar and butter, intensifying the flavors and providing a caramelized crust after baking. Candied sweet potatoes with marshmallows were commonly served alongside savory dishes, balancing out hearty meals with sweetness. Although its popularity has declined somewhat, this dish remains iconic, embodying the warmth and festivity of family traditions and the inventive spirit of African American home cooks. Cornbread and sausage dressing was a savory, hearty stuffing traditionally served during holidays, combining crumbled cornbread with spicy sausage and seasonings. This dressing was a flavorful way to stretch limited ingredients while creating a filling side dish that complemented roasted meats and vegetables. Cornbread, made from ground cornmeal, provided a crumbly texture and subtle sweetness that balanced the spicy, savory notes of the sausage. The recipe often included onions, celery, herbs, and broth to moisten the mixture, making it rich and satisfying. Families cherished this dish during festive gatherings, where it symbolized comfort, community, and the joy of shared meals. Cornbread and sausage dressing showcased the resourcefulness of cooks who transformed pantry staples into celebratory fare. Despite changes in holiday menus over time, this dressing remains a beloved classic in many African American households. Its rich flavors and traditions continue to evoke memories of family, warmth, and culinary heritage. Sorghum syrup. Pancakes were a breakfast favorite where pancakes, made from simple batter, were generously drizzled with locally produced sorghum syrup, an old-fashioned sweetener. Sorghum syrup, derived from the sorghum grain, had a deep, molasses-like flavor that paired beautifully with the light, fluffy pancakes. This syrup was an affordable and accessible sweetener before widespread use of refined sugar, especially in rural and southern communities. Pancakes served with sorghum syrup offered a hearty, energizing start to the day, fueling hard work and family activities. The combination was especially popular during times when budgets were tight, as sorghum was often grown at home or purchased cheaply. Sorghum syrup pancakes embodied a connection to agricultural roots and regional tastes, reflecting the ingenuity of cooks making the most of what they had. Though less common today, this pairing remains a nostalgic symbol of traditional Southern breakfasts and the rich flavors of African American culinary history. Rice and sausage jambalaya was a Creole-inspired dish blending fluffy rice with spicy sausage, peppers, onions, and tomatoes to create a vibrant and hearty one-pot meal. This dish was celebrated for its bold flavors, combining the heat of sausage with the earthiness of rice and freshness of vegetables. Jambalaya was especially popular in Louisiana and other southern regions with strong Creole influences, where African American cooks adapted and embraced this flavorful cuisine. The recipe was economical and versatile, often made with whatever ingredients were on hand, making it a perfect dish for families and gatherings. The slow cooking allowed the spices to meld and the rice to soak up the rich, savory juices. Though jambalaya remains well known, the specific traditional recipes that African American families passed down have become rarer, overshadowed by more commercialized versions. Reviving these recipes honors the creativity and cultural fusion that defines African American culinary heritage and the diverse roots of Southern cooking. Brown stew. Chicken was a hearty and soulful main dish cherished in African American cooking, featuring chicken pieces slowly simmered in a rich, deeply flavored brown sauce. The sauce was crafted from a blend of herbs, spices, and caramelized ingredients that gave it a robust and comforting taste. This slow cooking method allowed the chicken to become tender and infused with the savory sauce, making every bite a satisfying experience. Brown stewed chicken was often accompanied by rice, plantains, or vegetables, creating a balanced meal that fed families well on modest budgets. Its roots trace back to African and Caribbean culinary traditions, reflecting a fusion of flavors that traveled and adapted across regions. The dish was a staple at family gatherings and Sunday dinners, symbolizing warmth, togetherness, and cultural pride. Over time, while still beloved in many areas, the recipe has faded from mainstream home cooking, making it a hidden gem that deserves to be remembered and revived in modern kitchens. Peach cobbler with cornmeal crust was a beloved dessert in rural Southern communities, known for its uniquely textured cornmeal crust that added a pleasant, grainy contrast to the soft, sweet peaches inside. The peaches, often fresh or preserved, were cooked down with sugar and spices to create a luscious filling bursting with natural sweetness. This cobbler differed from typical versions by using cornmeal in the crust, which provided a rustic, hearty flavor that complemented the fruit perfectly. Families treasured this dessert for its simplicity and ability to make use of seasonal ingredients readily available in their gardens or local markets. Often served warm with a dollop of cream or ice cream, peach cobbler was a comforting end to meals and a treat for special occasions. Though less frequently made today, it remains an iconic example of traditional Southern baking and a testament to resourcefulness in using basic ingredients to create something memorable. Ham hock and pinto bean soup was a simple yet flavorful dish that sustained many families through times of scarcity by combining tender ham hocks with protein-rich pinto beans. The slow simmering of ham hocks infused the soup with a smoky, savory depth that elevated the humble beans into a satisfying meal. Pinto beans, inexpensive and nutritious, provided essential sustenance and heartiness, making this soup a practical choice for feeding large families on tight budgets. Often seasoned with onions, garlic, and spices, the soup was a staple in many African American households, reflecting both culinary heritage and adaptability. It was typically served with cornbread or rice, rounding out the meal with complementary textures and flavors. Though no longer a common dish in many modern kitchens, ham hock and pinto bean soup remains a reminder of cooking ingenuity and cultural resilience through difficult times. Okra and corn fritters were small, crispy fried patties that combined fresh okra with sweet corn kernels, creating a flavorful and satisfying snack or side dish. The batter typically mixed chopped okra, whole corn, flour, and seasonings before being pan-fried to a golden brown, resulting in a delightful contrast between the crunchy exterior and tender interior. This dish was especially popular in Southern African American communities, where both okra and corn were abundant and integral to local cuisine. Fritters were commonly served at family gatherings, church events, or as everyday snacks, showcasing the ability to turn simple ingredients into tasty treats. Their portability and ease of preparation made them a favorite for picnics and street food vendors. Though once widespread, okra and corn fritters have become less common today, yet they remain a delicious example of traditional cooking and resourcefulness. Sweet potato pie with meringue topping was a delightful variation on the classic sweet potato pie, featuring a light and fluffy meringue layer atop the smooth, spiced filling. The sweet potato base, rich in natural sweetness and creamy texture, was flavored with warm spices like cinnamon and nutmeg, while the meringue provided a sweet, airy contrast that elevated the dessert. This pie was especially popular during holidays and special occasions, serving as a centerpiece on many tables. The meringue topping required skill to prepare correctly, with its delicate peaks adding both visual appeal and a tender sweetness that balanced the richness of the pie. This variation showcased the creativity and flair of African American bakers, who built on traditional recipes to add elegance and flair. Though less commonly seen in modern times, sweet potato pie with meringue topping remains a cherished classic with nostalgic significance. Pickled mustard greens were a tangy, fermented side or condiment widely used in African American kitchens to add zest and preserve fresh produce. The greens were harvested young and packed tightly with salt and spices, then left to ferment, resulting in a sharp, slightly sour flavor that complemented rich or fried main dishes. Pickling extended the shelf life of mustard greens, making them available throughout the year, especially in times when fresh vegetables were scarce. This preservation method also enhanced the green's nutritional profile by introducing probiotics beneficial for digestion. Pickled mustard greens were commonly served with barbecue, pork, or rice dishes, offering a bright counterpoint to heavier flavors. The tradition of pickling reflects a deep knowledge of food preservation techniques passed down through generations. Though their popularity has waned, these greens remain a flavorful and culturally significant component of traditional Southern and African American cuisine. Cabbage and noodle salad was a refreshing cold dish that combined shredded cabbage with tender egg noodles and a tangy dressing, making it a popular side at picnics and potlucks. The crisp cabbage provided crunch and freshness, while the noodles added substance and a chewy texture, creating a satisfying balance. The dressing, often made from vinegar, sugar, and oil, gave the salad a bright, slightly sweet and acidic flavor that enlivened the ingredients. This salad was appreciated for its simplicity, affordability, and ability to be prepared ahead of time, making it ideal for gatherings and family meals. It showcased the clever use of pantry staples to create dishes that were both tasty and practical. Cabbage and noodle salad was a common feature in African American communities, especially in the South, but has become less prevalent in modern home cooking. Rediscovering this salad offers a glimpse into the resourceful and flavorful culinary traditions of the past. Molasses. Gingerbread cake was a warmly spiced dessert sweetened with molasses and flavored with fresh ginger, commonly enjoyed during colder months and holidays. The molasses lent a deep, rich sweetness and moistness to the cake, while the ginger provided a spicy, aromatic kick that balanced the flavors beautifully. This cake was often made with pantry staples, reflecting a time when fresh ingredients were scarce and cooking relied on what was on hand. Families treasured it for its comforting aroma and satisfying taste, often pairing it with tea or coffee. Molasses gingerbread cake was not only delicious, but also symbolized warmth and togetherness during the holiday season. Though it has become less common in contemporary baking, this cake remains an enduring part of African American dessert heritage and a celebration of simple, heartfelt flavors. Smoked turkey and black-eyed pea salad was a protein-rich dish that combined tender smoked turkey with hearty black-eyed peas and fresh vegetables, creating a flavorful and nutritious meal. The smoky depth of the turkey complemented the earthy taste of the peas, while additions like chopped onions, bell peppers, and herbs brought brightness and texture. This salad was often dressed with a tangy vinaigrette, enhancing the overall flavor and providing a refreshing contrast to the smoky and savory elements. It was popular as a light lunch or side dish during family gatherings and communal meals. The combination reflected the blending of resourcefulness and flavor, making the most of available ingredients to produce satisfying food. Though once a regular feature on tables, smoked turkey and black-eyed pea salad has become less frequent, but it remains a testament to culinary creativity and tradition. Fried green tomatoes with remoulade were a Southern classic featuring sliced, unripe tomatoes battered and fried to crispy perfection, served with a tangy remoulade sauce. The tomatoes offered a firm texture and slightly tart flavor that stood up well to frying, resulting in a crunchy exterior and juicy interior. The remoulade, made from mayonnaise, mustard, herbs, and spices, added a zesty and creamy contrast, elevating the dish. Fried green tomatoes were a popular appetizer or side, especially during tomato season, showcasing the ability to use unripe produce in delicious ways. This dish was a staple in African American and Southern cuisine, celebrated for its bold flavors and satisfying textures. Though less commonly prepared today, it remains a beloved recipe that highlights regional ingredients and traditional cooking techniques worth preserving. Sweetening with birch bark was one of the most ingenious and almost completely forgotten cooking secrets passed down through native traditions. Long before refined sugar ever touched American soil, Native American cooks knew that certain birch trees contained a natural, subtle sweetness hidden within their sap and inner bark. By carefully harvesting thin strips and boiling them down, they created a lightly sweet syrup or infusion that could flavor drinks, breads, and even savory dishes without overwhelming them. It was a sweetness that whispered rather than shouted, blending seamlessly with the smoky, rich flavors of open-fire cooking. Even today, a few remote communities and experimental chefs are bringing birch syrup back to the table, rediscovering a depth of flavor that supermarket sugar can never hope to match. But when it came to cooking full meals without pots or pans, there was one natural vessel that changed everything: giant pumpkins, hollowed out and transformed into Earth's own slow cookers. Gooseberry and elk were one of the most prized dishes that Native Americans would make regularly. This was because elk was one of the most treasured animals they had. In the Rocky Mountains, the Pacific Northwest, and the Great Plains, all sorts of tribes were known for how much they prioritized elk usage. This is because elk was something that was beneficial overall, just like deers and bison. The hides wouldn't just be used for clothing. A good quality elk hide, or one that was prized in towns like a white hide, would actually go for a fair amount of resources. They were also something that would provide meat for literally months. Even one elk was a game changer for a tribe going through tough times. They were dried for later use all the time, and the most valuable cuts were always kept for slow roasting so that they could have a great meal out of it. It was preserved for special ceremonies and hunting feasts, which would usually occur during the summer when gooseberries were also in harvest. A roasted elk haunch with some gooseberry sauce was enough food for an entire family or an entire hunting party. So, imagine what it could do for us today.
Chenopodium, known more casually as lamb's quarters, grows like a weed and eats like royalty. This wild green has been dismissed as backyard clutter for decades, but it was once carefully tended in indigenous gardens. Its triangular leaves and dusty white coating hide a powerhouse of nutrients, richer in calcium, iron, and protein than even spinach. Eastern tribes cooked it like you would collards, or dried it for soups and broths when the cold came creeping in. The taste is somewhere between earthy and nutty, and when it bolts in the summer, the seeds themselves can be ground into flour or tossed into stews. Lamb's quarters were a 2-for-1 deal: greens in the spring, grain in the fall. These days it gets pulled like a weed, tossed aside while spinach steals the spotlight. But back then, this was green gold. And if you think this garden invader was impressive, wait until you meet the marshland powerhouse that once fed entire coastal communities.
Fry bread tacos were not invented at the state fair. They were born out of displacement. When tribes like the Diné were forced onto reservations with nothing but government rations, flour, sugar, salt, and lard, they made something out of almost nothing. Fry bread. It was a form of protest, a survival food. Crisp on the outside, soft inside, it held beans, cheese, and meat, or whatever you had. Fry bread tacos were not supposed to be a treat. They were defiance, a way to stay full when everything else had been stripped away. But now, they are novelty, carnival fare, piled high with sour cream and lettuce and sold for $10 a plate. The story got lost. The pain, too. And what once stood for strength became a guilty pleasure. Most people never learn how close fry bread is to grief. They just taste the crunch and keep walking. But if you know the history, you taste something else too. A hunger that came from sorrow. A meal that meant you were still here. Nostalgic beef and sweet corn fry casserole was the dish that looked like a mess but tasted like a memory. Imagine browned ground beef bubbling under a thick layer of golden sweet corn kernels, all tied together with a few shakes of salt and pepper and a little bit of cream if you had it. Baked until the top got crispy and the edges turned caramel brown, it was the kind of casserole that made the whole house smell like comfort. In the 1970s, every family potluck or backyard gathering had at least one version of it, usually scribbled onto a crumpled index card or passed down by word of mouth. Sweet corn was cheap, beef was precious, and when you married the two together, you got a dish that somehow managed to feel luxurious, even when times were lean. The first spoonful always hit you with that sweet, salty magic, and before you knew it, you were scraping the sides of the pan for just one more bite. And if you thought this casserole was the gold standard of hearty, simple eats, just wait until you dive into a beef and hominy masterpiece that practically invented stick-to-your-ribs cooking. Pine needle broth was one of the forgotten miracle foods of early America, a natural tonic hiding in plain sight. At a time when vitamin deficiencies could mean life or death, Native American healers knew that boiling fresh green pine needles would release a flood of nutrients, especially vitamin C. It was not just medicine, it was survival in a cup. The flavor was bright, almost citrusy, with a faint earthy bitterness that made you feel stronger just breathing it in. Families would drink pine needle broth during harsh winters, through long hunting trips, and whenever sickness crept too close. In many ways, it was the original energy drink, long before anyone ever dreamed of cans and chemicals. Modern science eventually caught up and confirmed what traditional cooks already knew. The forest was its own pharmacy, if you knew where to look. And the best part? It took almost nothing to make. Just water, heat, and a handful of needles plucked with respect from a living tree. But sometimes, even when no pot or pan was available, native chefs found a way to cook hearty, life-saving meals using nothing but stones, fire, and ancient ingenuity. Buffalo and hominy soup is a bit of a unique one. I know that hominy is still something a lot of people prefer, definitely some UNCs and boomers, but also some people who just like retro, vintage, or cultural food. Buffalo meat is a bit harder to get than wild rice though, and depending on where you live, this might not be a dish you're able to recreate, but I digress. You brown the buffalo meat in a pretty large pot, simmer the broth, add the hominy and seasonings, and just stir. Then you taste, test, and serve. It's a pretty easy recipe considering that the rest of the stuff on here does take some technical cooking skill, especially when it comes to the prep work. If you do decide to recreate this, you should honestly aim for making a winter dish out of it. That's how it was historically eaten back in the day for the Native American peoples as well, and that's because bison meat was really good at keeping you warm. Plus, this is just one of those soups that brings life back into you.
That brings us to mashua, a peppery-tasting root crop native tribes trusted to survive the coldest mountain winters. Also known as Tropiolum tuberosum, this hardy vegetable thrived in harsh climates, storing effortlessly throughout the freezing months. Its bright roots offered a distinct, spicy flavor unlike anything else grown nearby, adding warmth and zest to winter dishes. Native Americans roasted or boiled mashua, incorporating its peppery kick into soups and stews, bringing comfort and nutrition to the toughest seasons. Even today, mountain communities in South America continue growing mashua, recognizing its incredible durability and nutritional profile. So why has such a robust, tasty, and easy-to-grow vegetable become forgotten? Reintroducing mashua could enhance modern meals with a flavorful punch, particularly in climates where typical crops struggle to flourish. And speaking of flavor, there's another wild vegetable, growing abundantly in North American forests. With a taste so intensely savory and onion-like, people hunt for it passionately each spring. Curious yet?
Wild rice casserole was not just a warm dish for cold nights. It was the heart of Ojibwe living. Wild rice, called manuman, was not farmed. It was hand-harvested by canoe, one grain at a time, bent and tapped into baskets from shallow lakes. That alone made it sacred. But it did not stop there. The rice was toasted, cleaned, and then slowly cooked with onions, mushrooms, sometimes venison or duck, and always care. It was earthy and deep, a kind of flavor that comes from fire and patience. But boxed rice came next, and microwave casseroles. Wild rice got pushed aside. Some of what is sold today as wild rice is not wild at all. It is cultivated and flavorless. Real manuman is still gathered in some places, but the casserole, the real one, is gone from most tables. We forgot the lakes. We forgot the paddles. We forgot the grain that gave so much. And now, it is easier to open a pouch and call it dinner. Crispy corn cakes. Stuffed with seasoned beef were one of those foods you could smell cooking before you even stepped into the event. Little golden discs sizzling in big iron skillets, stuffed to the brim with ground beef seasoned with paprika, onions, and a pinch of chili powder if you wanted to wake up your taste buds. The outside was crunchy and golden, the inside savory and juicy. It was a dance of textures that made you keep reaching for just one more. The trick was to keep the corn cakes thin enough that they crisped up, but thick enough to hold all that seasoned beef inside without falling apart. At powwows and fairs, you would see kids running around with one in each hand, faces smeared with beefy goodness, while the elders sat back and nodded approvingly. It was simple, it was satisfying, and it was the perfect food for big gatherings where nobody had time for forks and knives. And if you think crispy stuffed corn cakes sound irresistible, wait until you pull up a camp chair and hear about the kind of chili that made starry nights and crackling fires taste even better. Cactus as a natural tenderizer sounds almost too strange to believe, but it was an everyday trick in many native kitchens. Certain varieties, like prickly pear, are packed with natural enzymes that break down tough muscle fibers in meat. By rubbing raw cactus slices over a piece of game meat, or even marinating it in cactus juice, they could turn chewy, sinewy cuts into tender, flavorful meals that needed almost no extra cooking. It was pure kitchen magic, pulled straight from the harshest landscapes. In places where hunting was hard and every scrap of meat mattered, this trick was not just clever, it was survival. No waste, no frustration, just another example of how nature handed over its secrets to those who knew how to listen. The best part is that cactus does not mask the flavor of the meat. It simply softens it, letting the real richness shine through. Even today, modern chefs have started waking up to this forgotten genius. But it was not just fresh meals that mattered. When you needed to carry food across miles of wilderness, you needed another skill altogether: the incredible art of sun-drying meats under the open sky. Chili-spiced pumpkin mash is a dish that does wonders with some flavors you would have never imagined working together. The sweetness of pumpkin is something we normally would never associate with the intense tang of chili spices, but hey, this savory and sweet mash is here to break stereotypes and expand horizons. Pumpkin was a major crop for indigenous peoples across all kinds of regions in America, both the northern and southern parts. It was something people loved for the immense amount of nutrition it had. Indigenous peoples of the Northeast and Great Lakes regions would grow several different versions of squash, and some of these would include pumpkins. It was definitely a very fall-only item, and to be honest, it went along with the autumn vibes very well. People loved the contrast of this dish. The natural sweetness of the pumpkin balanced out very well from the heat of the chili peppers, and it made a very comforting dish. The texture of the mashed pumpkin was something that contrasted with the smoky notes of the chili, and that led to it becoming a very well-rounded flavor profile. It was like a party in your mouth. This is a recipe that's perfect for all the different kinds of vegetarian fans out there.
Enter the Indian potato, or Claytonia tuberosa, is no ordinary spud. It's the high-altitude underdog of tubers, prized by northern tribes for its smooth, nutty flavor and soft, buttery texture. Found in alpine meadows and cold forest floors, this plant pops up in spring with delicate white or pink blossoms and fleshy leaves. But it's what's underneath that counts. The small, finger-like tubers that taste somewhere between a new potato and a mild parsnip. Harvesting them required a gentle hand. Dig too rough, and you'd bruise the fragile roots. But once cooked, they were a culinary comfort. Roasted whole, boiled into stews, or mashed with herbs and fat. Tribes like the Dena'ina and Gwich'in sought them out as a seasonal treat, and their storage potential made them even more valuable. Today, they're rarely seen outside of wild plant guides or research gardens, quietly waiting in the soil for a comeback. But don't worry, the world of wild roots has more secrets to unearth. And the next one may look like a weed, but it once flavored medicine, meals, and more.
Reservation-style ground beef and wild onion tacos were the kind of everyday magic that kept folks smiling even when times were tight. Ground beef was stretched thin, seasoned with salt, pepper, and whatever wild onions could be foraged nearby. If you have never tasted wild onions, you are missing out. They hit somewhere between a chive and a spring onion, with this bold, peppery snap that made plain beef sing like a church choir. Wrapped up in soft tortillas or sometimes even more fry bread, they were simple, satisfying, and straight from the heart. This was not a meal that needed fancy cheese or salsa piled a mile high. It was pure, straight-talking flavor that left you licking your fingers and hoping there was just one more taco hiding somewhere on the plate. Now, if you think beef and onions are a match made in heaven, wait until you taste how a little bit of sage could turn a beef patty into something unforgettable. Clay pot slow cooking was not just a recipe. It was a way of pulling flavor out of the earth itself. Native American communities would form thick-walled pots from river clay, baking them slowly in open fires until they were strong enough to hold the richest stews and slow-roasted meats you can imagine. The secret was patience. Cooking meat in these pots over smoldering coals allowed the juices to stay trapped inside, cycling through the dish again and again, infusing every bite with pure, concentrated flavor. No fancy Dutch oven, no stainless steel miracle cookware. Just ancient craftsmanship and a bond with nature so strong you could taste it. The slow, even heat of a clay pot gave even the toughest cuts of meat a tenderness you would not believe unless you had tried it. In a world before timers and thermostats, this was real mastery. And the taste? It was as close to magic as food can get. But clay was not the only tool they used to summon incredible flavors. Sometimes, the real secret was hidden in something even lighter than air: something that grew tall all around them: corn husks. Hogging an entire hog for yourself was a great hobby for Native Americans. Wild boar roasts were a pretty common activity for Native Americans, but it wasn't something that they came up with. This was actually something they took from the Europeans for once. It was brought over to America by European explorers active during the 16th century. They brought it over in the Southwest, but native species began to spread over to the Southeast after continuous hunting. Tribes like the Creek and Seminole eventually adapted and began to incorporate boris into their diets as well, using their own traditional methods like roasting and pit cooking. The wild boars were really tough to hunt though, but they got pretty good at hunting them down too because of their experience with bows and spears. Some cool military facts. Now, they wouldn't eat the boars as soon as they got them. These were actually mostly preserved for the winter because of the massive amounts of meat they would give.
Arrowhead root, or wapato, was the aquatic treasure of riverbanks and marshes across the Pacific Northwest and beyond. Its heart-shaped leaves floated like tiny canoes, while underneath, tubers nestled in the muck waiting to be plucked. Harvesting wapato wasn't a solo act, it was a communal event. Women would wade into cold, muddy waters, using their feet to feel for the crunchy, potato-like roots below. Tribes like the Chinook and Kalapuya timed seasonal movements around wapato harvests. This wasn't just food, it was an event. The roots were roasted, boiled, or dried and stored, with a taste somewhere between a chestnut and a water chestnut. Wapato even held trade value. It was a marsh-grown currency. But as wetlands were drained and cities sprawled, its habitat shrank. Today, few recognize it beyond history books and restoration projects. Still, its legacy remains rooted in floodplain mud and memory. And speaking of roots with surprising sweetness, let's head south to discover a nut that's not a nut, and was sweet enough to thrive through hard times.
Ground beef and cornmeal dumplings were a true lifesaver when money was tight, but stomachs were growling. The beef was browned up and simmered slow with a few onions and maybe a pinch of pepper. Then it was topped with dollops of cornmeal dough. When it steamed and cooked right over the beefy juices, the dumplings puffed up soft and tender, soaking up every bit of that rich, savory flavor. No one was counting calories back then. They were counting smiles around the dinner table, and these dumplings guaranteed a few extra ones. It was a dish that filled you up from the inside out, the kind of meal that stuck to your ribs in the best way possible. Even better, you could stretch a pound of beef to feed 6 or 7 people easy, which meant there was always enough for unexpected guests or seconds. If you thought that was the peak of stretching flavor and comfort, just wait until you hear about a casserole that captured everything good about ground beef and corn and wrapped it up in pure 1970s nostalgia. Turning river stones into griddles for perfect flatbreads is one of those ancient tricks so clever it almost feels like a fairy tale. Large, flat stones were carefully selected, cleaned, and then heated slowly over open fires until they held a consistent, even warmth. Once hot enough, balls of simple dough, made from cornmeal, acorn flour, or other gathered grains, were slapped down onto the stones. There were no skillets, no pans, just direct primal cooking at its purest. Even today, traditionalists who practice stone cooking say you can taste the river, the fire, and the earth in every bite. And back then, when every meal needed to last as long as possible, even cooked meat was treated like a precious currency. That is where one of the oldest and most ingenious preservation methods came into play, using nothing but animal fat and wisdom passed down through generations.
One of the most surprising forgotten vegetables Native Americans grew that needs to come back is the groundnut. Known as Apios americana, this curious potato-like tuber once covered fields and forests across the Northeast. In fact, before corn took center stage, groundnut was actually the staple of many native diets. Families would roast, boil, or mash these small, protein-rich tubers, creating hearty meals packed with energy. Even European colonists quickly caught on, calling it a true lifesaver in times of scarcity. Its vines spread easily, producing plentiful harvests year after year. Groundnuts even enriched the soil, boosting other plants around them. So why has this nutritional powerhouse vanished from our tables? Rediscovering this incredible vegetable could transform modern meals, just like it sustained entire communities centuries ago. But groundnut isn't the only lost gem. What about a native root so deliciously sweet and nutty it was a winter staple, even sweeter after the frost? Get ready to meet your new favorite tuber.
Navajo blue corn mush was more than breakfast. It was birth, literally. In Diné traditions, newborns would taste it as their first solid food, a welcome to the world. Made from finely ground blue cornmeal, water, and a touch of juniper ash, this simple porridge had purpose in every bite. The ash was not decoration. It added calcium and made the mush more nutritious. And it came from a sacred plant. You stirred it with patience, ate it with intention. The flavor was subtle, earthy, and warm. Some added a hint of honey or wild berries, but even plain, it spoke volumes. Today, it barely speaks at all. Processed cereal took its place. Most Navajo children grow up without ever tasting it. Outside the community, almost no one has heard of it. It became ceremonial, yes, but also silent. It lost its seat at the daily table. Blue corn still grows, juniper still stands, but the mush is missing. And with it, the sense that food could be a welcome, not just a meal. What we lost was not just a dish, it was how we met the world. Crispy fried beef and root vegetable pockets were not just dinner, they were survival disguised as a treat. Picture dough rolled thin, packed full of seasoned ground beef, diced carrots, sweet potatoes, and turnips, then folded tight and fried until golden and flaky. It was like the first generation of the hand pies everyone brags about today, only made from scratch, with love and whatever you had left in the root cellar. These little pockets were the ultimate grab-and-go meal before drive-thrus were even a thing. They stayed warm wrapped in cloth, perfect for long days in the fields or a chilly walk to the town market. Every bite was crispy outside, juicy and tender inside, with the sweet earthiness of the root veggies soaking up all the beefy flavor. Families would make dozens at a time and stash them away for later, if they managed to last that long. Now, if you think stuffing beef and veggies into a crispy golden package sounds brilliant, wait until you hear about the Sunday classic that brought sage, beef, and cornbread together into something that tasted a whole lot like home. How native chefs made instant trail mix with dried berries and nuts is a perfect example of simple genius meeting real-world survival. Long before colorful packages lined grocery store shelves, Native American communities were gathering handfuls of nature's purest energy foods, drying them carefully under the sun, and combining them into powerful portable meals. Wild berries like chokecherry, elderberry, and wild strawberries were prized for their tartness and nutrition, while nuts like acorns, walnuts, and pine nuts packed a heavy punch of fat and protein. Some tribes even added roasted seeds, puffed grains, or strips of dried meat for extra stamina. The goal was not just taste, but endurance. It was survival in your pocket, designed by thousands of years of knowledge. And while they packed sweetness and strength into every bite, when it came to seasoning savory meals, native chefs turned to another source altogether: wild plants that turned every piece of meat into pure wilderness flavor. If corn and tomatoes sound like your cup of tea, then sun-dried tomato and corn pudding is something that's going to rock your entire world. Native Americans had a fun little way of making this recipe too. Indigenous peoples would grind corn using all kinds of different tools, such as a handheld grinding tool or a stone mortar and pestle. This was all done so that it would achieve an incredibly coarse texture in the end. And then, herbs were added. The herbs were pretty much the usual ones you've seen, but any peppers from trading were also commonly added onto this. As far as typical Native American flavors go, this is definitely a little bit unconventional. The pudding was also something that was a unique texture. It was also something that was cooked on a cast iron skillet more than it was made over an open fire. The slow cooking was really essential for people because the flavors would seal themselves in completely, giving you the savoriness and tang of the sun-dried tomatoes with the creamy texture and sweetness of corn. When you hear about sweet potatoes, your mind immediately goes to them. They're just that good.
Wild sarsaparilla root may have ended up as a fizzy footnote in the story of root beer. but it was so much more than a soft drink ingredient. Found in woodlands from the Northeast to the Midwest, this aromatic plant offered a pantry full of possibilities. Indigenous tribes used the root to brew tea and medicinal infusions. It had a spicy sweet flavor and was believed to help with everything from colds to joint pain. But it wasn't just the root that mattered. In early spring, the tender shoots were harvested as a crisp green vegetable, a seasonal treat that brought fresh flavor after a long winter. Wild sarsaparilla was food, medicine, and even fragrance, making it one of those forest finds that pulled triple duty. But while it lingered in shade and soil, out on the dry plains, another plant was proving that even a squash with attitude could survive. And scrub your hands clean too.
Tell us your favorite forgotten recipe below, like if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe for more delicious discoveries.